following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages.
Tonight, we break down the key features of the Data Protection Act recently passed in Sri Lanka. A number of entities have raised concerns pertaining to the Act's readiness to secure the right of privacy entrusted to all citizens of Sri Lanka. But how valid are these claims? Is Sri Lanka making strides towards a more novel and contemporary legal system? Where are the fallbacks? And what must we do right now to ensure the rights in the law are in fact enforced? Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty, where we are discussing contemporary legal topics and giving you a breakdown. And this week, as always, we are bringing in something that has been within the legal field for quite some time. Contentious arguments being brought from two sides to this very specific act, and what I'm referring to is the Data Protection Act. Now, external and internal factors have raised arguments about whether it's actually serving the purpose, whether it's going too far. A lot of things that we really need to break down so that laymen can get an understanding. And to give us this understanding, we have with us a very special individual, Aparrajitha Ariyadasa. Thank you so much, Ms., for joining us. She's a senior partner at the ATD Legal Associates. She's a lecturer. She has already completed her PhD in cyber terrorism and is reading for a PhD in privacy and digital entrepreneurship at the University of Texas. She has also been acclaimed as one of the top 10% of the researchers in her field by the SSRN Research Journal. A lot of important things to cover within today's discussion. Before we go to the guest, as always, we're going to give you a small breakdown of how this discussion is going to go forward. Firstly, we are going to talk a bit about the salient features of the Data Protection Act. Then move into what the Data Protection Authority is, which has been identified by this Act. Then talk about the responsibility of data controllers. And finally, the effects on cybercrime, which has been a topic within the discussion platforms within this country for quite some time.
Hello, my name is Sithi. I'm an undergraduate. My question is about the Data Protection Act. What are the salient features of the Data Protection Act?
All right, let's get into the discussion. Once again, thank you, Ms. Aparrajitha, for joining us. The Data Protection Act, as we had discussed previously also, a lot of people maybe who doesn't have the experience on the ground has been raising a lot of questions, maybe in terms of whether the Act is actually performing what it says it is, whether it's going too far, and those are the kind of understandings that we want to get now. I didn't mention with our introduction, you're part of multiple committees in sort of drafting the legislation within this country for quite some time, and you have been in the bar for over 20 years. I want to get your take on where do you start when I give you the topic Data Protection Act, because a lot of people are not clear about this, because we across this table we have discussed the topic of the computer crimes, what exactly that encompasses. We have had the argument of it's out of date, we need to bring all of this back updated. And we know, have a lot of experience with the European Union and working with these countries that at least have a say in in this improved sort of legislation. So once again, I pose the question, where do we start when I say the word Data Protection Act?
Yes, before talking about all these legal jargons, we'll see what is this?
Yeah.
So actually data means private data. Maybe your data or my data. Private data means the so-called private data. Your number, your phone number, your age, your disorders, your fingerprint, your eyeball, the size, everything.
Yeah.
So why? Some people ask from me, whenever, like couple of years I've been talking and teaching over 20 years. Why we need to protect our phone number? Yeah, fair enough. Why is that?
Yeah.
But the problem is, why the numbers are taken? Now see, when it comes to all these free platforms, now the phone call is free, right? We need not to pay.
Yeah.
So as long as a public Wi-Fi is there, our communication is almost free. So why these people are giving, all these countries, giving free platforms for us to communicate? Actually, the hidden agenda is surveillance. Okay. What we talk how we talk, the way we talk, and how are our gestures, body gestures. Now we use a lot of common social networks, social media. So what we do in social media, they always take all the data and analyze us. Why? There are a lot of hidden intentions. One is surveillance. Second one is advertising.
Advertising, yeah.
So now see, if you like a page in any social media, the next moment you will have pop-ups on the same wavelength, right? Same topic. Why is that? They analyze your data. Actually, the big data is the most important business, most profit-making business in the world, even though we don't use it, right? So that is the importance for the people who are having these social networks and free telephone providers, not telephone actually, communication providers. I don't want to mention the names. So there are a lot of repercussions. Actually, privacy is a human right. My private thing, if I don't want to disclose, it is private, and it is a human right for me to protect my privacy, right? Actually, we harp on a lot of things that we are not having laws, but I'm very optimist in legal things. We have. Actually, privacy, even though our constitution, Sri Lanka constitution doesn't talk about the privacy as a human right, there are held cases to protect the privacy. That means in any country in the world, even the Universal Declaration of Human Rights protects the privacy as a human right. So with this human right, the countries, actually especially EU and America, so they were thinking of protecting the human's privacy. Therefore, all these privacy laws came into action. So when it comes to privacy, can anyone use these data simply? It's called processing, not only use, there are a lot of things covered by the word processing. So, so the countries, especially European Union, they thought, look here, with the IT, with the communication, the ICT, all these private data is going here and there. Therefore, this law came up specially to protect human rights. So that's how the background is. And when it comes to the data, what data is private? The personal data is private. So processing of personal data is prohibited by these laws. That's how it is.
I think you have really made the connection between why the reason why this legislation actually came to play. The next question I want to ask is now, I think again you had mentioned to us the identification of privacy, as in privacy as a human right, was one thing that this act also focused on, was actually pushed that really forward. How, like one person could ask, okay, look, we are not in a position to maybe sue Facebook or maybe sue these big international bodies that have social networks. How are we protected, or how does this act in fact cater to protecting our personal data in those kinds of aspects? Because it is not something that a lot of people would understand or actually feel that connection to. Is that protected? My first question.
Yes. With the Data Protection Act, of course, everything is protected as long as the controllers are identified. Actually, I wanted to discuss this matter under
controllers. We'll
under
continue
controllers.
there.
But yes.
The basic answer would be yes in that scenario. Moving ahead, if you had to point out certain things, these weren't there before, now with this, I think this was brought as a bill in November of 2021. Now we have it. where would you point to in the data protection bill? These are things that are salient features. These are things that have really come out of this act, because one thing that I actually took for like one entire segment was the Data Protection Authority.
Yeah.
What are the other things that are really hidden within this? Because I knew you were part of like the entire process for quite some time.
Yeah, so salient features, of course, as I told you, this is always protecting the human rights. So actually, all these are made, all these sections are made by way of the data protection principles. So there are data protection principles, about 8, right? One is lawfulness. So the data processing should be lawful, right? So whoever the people, now as an example, Derana takes my number, right? So without my consent, you can't use it. Lawfulness means you have to show cause. You are using my number for a lawful purpose, right? So you can't have a number for an unlawful purpose, to harass people, to bully people, to defame. So you can't do it.
So what qualifies for a lawful purpose in general?
In general, of course, like there are legal things now.
Yeah, okay.
So lawfulness.
Also, something I want to clarify is without the Data Protection Act, was this not present before?
Sometimes some areas were not protected. Now see, as an example, these consumer protection laws, right? I have got lot of calls from lot of insurance companies about a policy, to sell a policy, right? They bug us, then we block them. That's how it is. And see how many SMSs you get from this.
On a daily basis,
or on daily basis we are getting a lot of SMS. So those are not ethical, and sometimes in other countries those are not lawful. So those are the lawful or unlawful acts. It may be, sometimes it may be completely a penal offense. So it all depends on the scenario, lawfulness.
All right. We have a lot more things to discuss within the program, but we'll take a very short break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us.
My name is and I am a computer science undergraduate. My question is on the Data Protection Authority. What are the key characteristics of the Data Protection Authority identified in the recently passed Data Protection Act?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in discussion with Attorney at Law Aparrajitha Ariyadasa. A very good, I think, a comprehensive segment where we passed out on like the basic outline of what the Data Protection Act really possesses. Now, the fundamentals that I wanted to focus on next was on the Data Protection Authority, but I believe I had to cut you short when you were explaining exactly what other features are available. Now, if someone is to really, I don't think a lot of people would look at the Data Protection Act and really like go to the extent of understanding what it really gives us. But if you had to, maybe even to a client or explain to someone, what exactly would you say now these rights are entrusted? Now these are things that you can actually, try in the face of at courts, take this to that level. What are those general principles that you would see?
Yeah, general principles are, as I told you, one is lawfulness, one is the accuracy. The data processing, whatever the data you are obtaining, whatever the data you are processing should be accurate. And also the other thing is it should be explicit. The purpose should be very explicit, and you have to have a specific purpose, specific and explicit. So if you want to use my data for a TV program, you can't use my data, my own data for another thing
so that's
without my consent. So as long as my consent is given, perfectly all right. So I saw a very smart move with one of the telecommunication platforms, not Sri Lankan platforms, which we use.
Okay.
So they have changed their privacy policy, and they were sending a notification saying that if you don't accept the new privacy policy, we are not going to accept you. We are not going to give the provide the service.
Okay.
Right? I know. I don't want to mention the name. You all know that. What European Union did was that they challenged. They said no, we can't accept this because of this consenting.
Yeah.
That means you are consenting them to take your data for anything. That was the privacy policy. So actually, we as laymen are not worried to read the policy.
Exactly.
Since I was doing this, I read the policy. That means, yeah, they can use whatever the things.
Okay.
We discussed through that particular
Platform.
network.
Okay.
They can utilize for anything. Right. So EU objected it, and there's an exception for EU. Actually, EU didn't accept the latest privacy policy of that particular platform.
Right.
So we have to be very specific.
Okay.
At least we have to know that this is a surveillance thing. Now, when it comes to end-to-end encrypted platforms,
Yeah.
Even though it's end-to-end encrypted, the programmer who make that coding, actually if I make a code by Python, I know what it is. I can read it and I know what it is.
Yeah.
So end-to-end encryption means even though the message goes out with encryption, the people who have made can read it at the back end. Now when it comes to platforms like Telegram, they are open-ended. So when you go through the source code, you can identify and understand what is going on inside.
Right.
But when it comes to closed source platforms, you can't find it. Only the country can find it, the person who make it.
Right.
That's the thing. So that's the difference between the open source and closed source things. So that's how it is. So we have to be very careful.
Ms. Ariyadasa, something that multiple questions are coming to my mind when I listen to you, but something that I want to clarify is, now you all have identified something called the Data Protection Authority. Now, prior to this, if you could just give us which authority did we have to reach out to if we had to make a complaint pertaining to, like there are a lot of cyber crimes, and we can actually go into details on that on our last segment. But what is the Data Protection Authority's primary role in this scenario, without going into too many details?
Actually, it is the regulatory authority which make regulations, and actually this has a very vast area to cover, because when it comes to data protection, there are a lot of things to be done. Data protection impact assessments, data protection officers, and there should be more regulations made. Even though we have the law, we have to have a couple of guidelines. Now when it comes to artificial intelligence, we all use this FaceTime.
Yeah.
So do we have the guidelines?
Exactly.
So we use emotion recognition technology. Do we have the guidelines? Sometimes IT experts, they use IoTs. Do we have the guidelines?
Yeah.
Right? There are a lot of things, ECGs, MMR. So all these are data.
Yeah.
But actually none of that. Neither the European Union GDPR or the Artificial Intelligence Act and this Act doesn't cover this cognitive data.
Right.
So that is the gap, that is the lacuna. Actually recently I did a research, I told you. So in that it was revealed that this cognitive data is not protected under both the acts.
Right.
So there are a whole heap of gaps also, but this is actually a very lucrative act which I like.
Right. Moving forward, if you had to things that may not be too clear within this act, if we had to take maybe the Data Protection Authority, or if we had to, going back to my initial question about one person would think, is it the only the police that we can go to if there is some form of complaint that we need to make that happened in the cyberspace? Or does this act provide something else, some other form of guideline, some other authority that we can go to? Or is it like still, if we are going to go to the police, that is where we need to go to? The question really comes up because of the primary fact that people are not, one thing, as you said, they're not aware of what their rights are particularly. And in extension to that, they're not aware of which authorities people should go to exactly to get sort of like that direction. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the Data Protection Authority, but when it comes to the thing is, it all depends on the scenario. Okay. Now, if it is a data breach or computer crime, you can go to the CID and make the complaint, and then they will file a case in magistrate court, but the jurisdiction is with the High Court, but initial stages are done by primary investigation is done by magistrate court. So that when it comes to computer crimes, actually this Privacy Act go hand in hand with the computer crime, because now these IT laws, I don't feel that they are straightforward IT. These are hybrid things, interdisciplinary, right? But I see from Data Privacy Act the procedural law. Procedural law, of course, has to be a bit clear about it. Now, when it comes to even Electronic Transaction Act, the procedural law, and there should be a extensive guidelines for the judges about the admissibility, the investigation side. So there are a whole heap of things to discuss under these things out of the black letters. Okay. So training should be done. Now, when it comes to data privacy law, who are the people who are responsible, and how the data protection officers, the qualifications, what are the certificates? So all these are there.
Right. We have to go for a short break, but before that, if I could ask you a very short question. The issue of the right to privacy, does that, now if we have an FR petition, we can directly go to the Supreme Court. Do we recognize privacy as a fundamental right within this country, or where does that fall?
Actually, as per the Constitution, it's not a fundamental right. But I have seen a couple of court cases, the privacy is accepted, privacy is recognized. But now the privacy, the data processed without the consent are prohibited. Now this is given properly.
Yeah, so within the data protection.
Yeah, so anyway you have to have the legislation, that's it. Yeah. And also even the judges can make laws if they feel that it's an injustice. Yeah. So actually I'm very positive about all these laws. I am not a pessimist.
Right. A lot of other things that we need to discuss with you, Mrs. Aparrajitha, but before that we'll take a very short break. We are watching Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us.
Hello, my name is Dhulmika and I'm a systems analyst. My question today is on the responsibilities of data controllers. What are the key responsibilities of data controllers in relation to data protection?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with attorney at Law Aparrajitha Ariyadasa. We covered two segments pertaining to the Data Protection Act, and something we are going to touch on now is something that was specifically mentioned within the Act, which was on the data controllers. Now, controllers and processes, which you can find on Part 3. What exactly is a data controller? I think if we start there, that will make more sense to everyone. And what exactly is the authority that is bestowed upon them? How are they identified? Are they another form of sort of police officer? What is the understanding there?
Yes, I'll tell you a story. It's easy. right? So there's a very interesting case in European Union called fashion ID case, right? If you go through www.fashionid.de, you won't be able to access.
Okay.
So that means they are protected internally. So that is another story. But apart from that, the Fashion ID website, they were selling clothing through the website. So what happens is, they had this icon, the Facebook icon, to be like button.
Okay.
Actually, like button was there. Whenever a customer enters, opens the website, automatically their data will be processed by the Facebook. It goes to the Facebook.
Without their consent, none of that.
Nothing. So no matter whether they click the button or not. So this was a huge ha-hoo in the European Union, and a third party, a consumer rights organization, filed a case against this, and it was held, actually this is against the Ireland Facebook.
Okay.
It was held, they are joint controllers,
Okay.
no matter what. So the Fashion ID website as well as the Facebook were joint controllers. So whoever the people who are using, controlling the data, are called data controllers. Okay. So joint controllers means if three of us, if many parties control the data, utilize the data, that means they are liable.
Okay.
So the Act prohibits utilizing or processing data without the consent.
Okay. Apart from that, now I think the issue of liability, the issue of these data controllers should take accountability for their actions. What else does the Act go into when you talk about data controllers? Now, I think you made it clear, look, these responsibilities now haven't been bestowed on data collection in this country for quite some time, and we are grateful that there is an Act that is there now that actually covers this. What else are, because that would be the most pertinent issue within this, within the Act, one would say, because data controllers are the ones that need to have some form of framework in which, like some form of guidance given. What are the other issues? What are the other responsibilities that are bestowed upon them?
Before talking about the responsibilities, actually they have to be in compliance with all these principles. So it's very specific, even Sri Lanka's Act. So it's very specific. So they have to be accountable, they have to be accurate, they have to be precise, they have to be specific, blah, blah, blah. So when it comes to other issues, now when it comes to issues in Sri Lanka, I don't know whether I must use this name. Now, there are platforms, no?
Yeah, let's go with that.
So it's very difficult for me to, it's unlike research. So we can't use names. Now see, there are transportation platforms.
Okay, yeah.
Right? There are about 2-3 platforms. I have analyzed 2 platforms.
Okay.
Right? One of the platforms, actually it's an international platform.
Okay.
We can select whatever the transportation mode, either a cab or whatever, and we click it, and then the driver calls us. Just after the ride, just after we get in to the vehicle, they can't access our phone.
Right.
So I see it as a very ethical. Actually, ethics is ethics have to be taught like in a comprehensive manner, even though it is not specified here. They are not. That means they are not using our data after the ride.
Yeah.
So I see a website, which is a ticketing website. It's a Sri Lankan website. So they ask for our passport number.
Okay.
So we are giving our name, full name, address, passport number. So it is not specific how long they are taking. They have not they have not, mentioned about the privacy policy. So whenever these websites are made, you have to have a privacy policy. So likewise, actually this particular act is very specific about it. So in the near future, I know there will be a lot of cases when it comes to these websites. But when it comes to a particular transportation platform, even after the ride, we can save the number of the driver or the consumer in the local transportation side. So that is the difference between the foreign platforms.
Foreign platforms.
Yes.
Now, I think that gives us an understanding of what sort of frameworks are required to have sort of legitimate enterprises when it comes to the online platform. Where else are the restrictions provided now? A lot of people wouldn't know where to complain to, or wouldn't really understand the technical aspect of all of this. They would be asked a certain question, they would give away their details. As you mentioned in the first initial part of the program, privacy doesn't mean, for some people it wouldn't mean a lot, or they wouldn't know that they're getting the information is being pulled out of them. What are the key, or maybe the key authorities that you need to look at, or the key aspects that you need to look at within this Data Protection Act itself, about what is most important, or what is identified as things that are protected? What are things that data controllers cannot intervene or cannot collect from you at any given instance? Because one would know that there will be only few people that can ask for your national identity card. Not every person can ask for that. So things like that. And if we take it a step further from there, are data controllers required to have some form of physical presence in a country if they are to function within that country? Are those things met within this act, or are those things that we had discussed separately?
No, all those are regulatory measures. Okay. So now when we talk about the act, I don't see many loopholes. There are loopholes. In any act pertaining to IT, there are. Yeah. So when it comes to regulations, there should be regulations for these, social media networks, and there should be regulations. Now, as an example, EU has this digital single market, and they are geo-blocked. That's why I told you this Fashion ID website, you can't access from Sri Lanka. So they are geo-blocked. So there should be measures for the Sri Lankan platforms, not only platforms but also websites. There should be a geo-block. So where to draw the line? Is it within Sri Lanka or the South Asia or whatever? So it all depends on the policymakers and the politicians. Right. And when it comes to this gig economy, so it is a tri-party platform, right? The seller is there, the service provider is there, and the consumer is there. So there are a whole heap of aspects. So the data is utilized in all the aspects. So my personal opinion is, whoever the platforms, whatever the platforms are there, you have to have a local office, because some platforms, they don't have a local office. So some platforms, they don't help us to retrieve data, or sometimes there are videos, very detrimental videos, which we can't take them down. So sometimes, actually, within this week, I think I got about 10 clients on the specific issue. Okay. So we have to have other guidelines, and we have to draw some lines to these, major players in the social media. I mean, social media platforms. So that should be there.
If I were to ask you, I think as a final question for this segment, now certain platforms collect money, as in more often than not, almost all platforms collect money. What sort of restrictions are made there? Where I think we are going away from the topic a bit when we ask this, because the capacity for fraud to happen online is far worse than in like real life because there is no interaction between two people. Does the Data Protection Act in any way support that? Because we see credit card, the card frauds happening. We see when data that is from monetary end, there's like actual damages that are created to an individual. Does the Data Protection Act look into that aspect, or is it just personal data, or looking into a person's resources as in whatever is in their storage or things like that?
This is exclusively with regard to the processing of personal data, but when it comes to credit card frauds and all, we have the law. And also when it comes to the financial platforms, they have to get the approval from the central bank.
Right.
So they can't do ad hocly.
Okay.
They can't. And also, like I have seen practically, if dollars come to your account, they will definitely question you.
Okay.
So you have to actually answer for those. They are very keen on that.
Right. I think, again, another good understanding given there. We'll take a very short break and we'll discuss a bit more about the criminal aspect of all of this and what the allowance of cyber crimes and how Data Protection Act really caters or actually stops cybercrime or caters to people going into police officers and really complaining about these offences a bit more. We'll talk about all of that. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us.
Studying business information system, and my question is on the effect of cybercrime. How does the new Data Protection Act address cybercrime related offences?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. This is our last segment and we are in conversation with attorney at Law Aparrajitha Ariyadasa. A few very important segments that we passed, and I think this is a field that you have been specializing in for quite some time, but within this time frame, we'll try and get a lot of details out of you. How does keeping my question very brief, how does the Data Protection Act actually look at cybercrime? How is cybercrime within our country being dealt with better with this act? Actually,
Cybercrime Act is, I actually love it. Many people say that we don't have the proper legislation and there are a lot of loopholes, but it is made out of the Budapest Convention. I don't see much difference between the Cybercrime Act and the Budapest Convention, but there are a couple of things, couple of loopholes. But when it comes to data, unauthorized access is completely prohibited. It's an offense under the Computer Crimes Act. So even unauthorized access to data is also prohibited, and it's a penal offense. Sorry, it's a criminal offense. So actually, if somebody privacy law is about totally exclusively on processing of data, but if it is unauthorized access of computer programs and the computer, even switching on a computer without the consent, without the authority is prohibited. So I think with the privacy law, it gives a comprehensive protection to the stakeholders, but the thing is the enforcing authorities. Actually, I have
so that is some area that we need to look into in this.
Yes, I have noticed that enforcing authorities should be more powerful and accountable for all these. I see a bit of a loophole in this act with regard to
who exactly enforces this.
Yes.
Right. Something that I want to clarify from you now, since we are in the topic of cybercrime, is just taking a step back now. There is novel legislation like the Data Protection Act, and it's a very good thing. But we saw certain critique being leveled against it as it being too intrusive, to maybe maybe like to either not to defraud but rather to defame some individual if certain data is taken, if certain data is made public. and you collect it from one of those public forums, you would mention, okay, look, that was technically not your personal data. How are those, how are those categorizations made? How are those differentiations made?
Yeah, so actually this is very specific about the public interest. So data could be used for the public interest. Okay. That doesn't mean your personal data should be used to defame someone. Okay. So now what I see from the social media or like media is that personal data is utilized to defame people. Yeah. So whether this lady is having an affair with someone, so it's none of the media business. Yeah. So it's the private thing. Yeah. So I don't know why this debate came up. Yeah. My personal opinion is there are ways and means, there are exemptions to use data. Okay. But imagine if somebody has HIV and she's a political figure. In order to defame her, in order to make a black mark on her, that is being used. Yeah. So is it fair enough? So my personal opinion is the expression, freedom of expression should be ethical. Right. So ethical perspectives in Sri Lanka are not properly discussed. And also when it comes to European Union, they are very much concerned on these societal problems. Now when it comes to societal problems, there are digital sociology and algorithmic discrimination, lot of things are discussed. Yeah. So they can't utilize data ad hocly to whatever the purposes they want. Yeah. So my personal opinion is that actually we can get around for the public interest, and public data is not private data, so public data could be used. Mm-hmm. So if what is an example? I actually
one thing as you think of the example, one thing I want to clarify is now as we come to the end of the program also, since you have a lot of experience with dealing with the European Union, you would notice the next few steps that we need to take now. The countries in conversations about building a more, like going towards more international arbitration sort of without having to go to courts, and I know this is an area that you have studied in as well. In thinking of making or going to more quick sort of alternate dispute resolution methods, how does data protection fit in? How does this act fit in, and what are the next steps that we need to take? Because as we spoke before, also something that you did mention was we are making steps forward, but at the same time we are behind certain countries, we are behind certain legal frameworks that exist that are more mature than us. What are the next few steps that we need to take as of now?
No, actually I'm not telling that we are behind. Okay. When it comes to legal, these black letters, yeah, we are not behind. We are in line with the EU. Okay. But the thing is, like, we are behind the ethical perspectives, okay, not the legal perspectives. And also when it comes to artificial intelligence, the proposal is still being discussed. So because of this artificial intelligence, we need to have artificial intelligence act as well. So when it comes to e-commerce, of course, we have to have a couple of legislations, but I don't think we are behind. Okay. Because we are a country which has ratified a lot of international conventions. Yeah. What did you ask?
Yeah, no, my specific question was on what are the next, as in like if there is legislation that we need to introduce to like go hand in hand with the Data Protection Act. Are there, my first question would be, are there certain legislation that we need to like introduce as of now? What are the next few steps that we need to take in like updating, amending the Data Protection Act, or even like how the cyberspace is being governed within our country? Yeah,
so when it comes to the cyber security perspectives, you have to have a lot of security in websites. Yeah. So what I have, actually we have measured a couple of vulnerability checks. Yeah. Sri Lankan websites, especially government websites, are really vulnerable. Some government websites I don't want to mention because it's a very crucial situation. It is really vulnerable. It is not secured. Okay. One of the websites. So we have to have proper geo-blocks, and also we have to be very careful about a cyber security point of view, and also there should be a government experts for reverse engineering, in the sense like cyber forensics. So cyber forensic part is really practically I have not seen cyber forensic parties working here properly, because now even these politicians, they can't once the defamatory statement goes around, they only can take them down. So
the damage isn't accounted for.
Yesterday actually there was a Switzerland lawyer who called me, and she wanted to get some idea on this EU thing and Sri Lankan thing. So they are also having gaps, not only us. So actually what they do is that they consult. So they consult the proper people, and they consult other countries, and they get the proper know-how. But I feel in this country the awareness is the major thing to be done. People don't know what it is, and also not only the law side of it, but there should be a management side of it. This is a data protection management, right? So that should be introduced, in the sense implemented. It is introduced, so it should be implemented. And tools. Protection tools should be used.
I think there is quite a bit that we have covered within this program. We'll have to end it there. I'd like to thank Attorney at Law Aparrajitha Ariyadasa, Senior Partner at ATD Legal Associates. She's a lecturer, and she has been studying cyber terrorism, privacy, and digital entrepreneurship. She has also been identified as one of the top in the top 10% of researchers by the SSRN Research Journal within her field. Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts with us. We hope to have you again here to talk a bit more about the cyberspace. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right. The right to privacy being enshrined in our legislature is a very important victory for our country moving forward. It is time we as citizens realize the importance of enforcing these rights without having it being taken away from us by force. Muriel Hildebrandt, a research professor of interfacing law and technology in the Netherlands, who is a widely acclaimed scholar in this field, had shared the following thoughts on data protection. Without shelter, without fellow human beings who respect our unwillingness to share private thoughts, and without a legal system that gives us an effective right to ward off intrusions into our private life, we have no privacy. In a world crowned with automated decision systems, our privacy increasingly depends on the design of these systems. That is all from us here at Law, Land and Liberty. If you had missed today's program, you can watch the entire episode on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/English. Join us again next week as we break down a contemporary legal topic. I'm Dariduthanwasa. Have a great night.